Welcome to Verified Souls. You're 3 miles deep in Tonto National Forest when your safety whistle gets an answer, then another, then 6 more, all around you, all perfect copies of your own signal. A family finds a campsite that vanishes when the rangers arrive. Trail cameras capture something walking between locations miles apart, in seconds, always at 3:47 a.m., always getting closer. A forest that burned 30 years ago refuses to grow back, and the ground still whispers in Apache that it's hungry. These aren't legends passed down through generations. These are the incidents that made experienced campers abandon their gear and run. 9 encounters from Tonto National Forest. 9 different kinds of terror. Some walked out. Some never went camping again. All of them left something behind in those trees. If you've ever felt watched on a trail, if you've ever heard footsteps that matched yours too perfectly, if you've ever seen something in a photo that wasn't there in person, you need to hear what happened in these woods. Because the forest doesn't care if you believe. It just waits for you to come close enough. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's lurking in the verified case files. Because after tonight, you'll understand why some trails stay empty. The first bad decision was thinking a whistle would make me safer out there. You know that cheap orange safety whistle they tell you to carry when you're hiking alone? The one that's supposed to scare off animals and help rescuers find you if you get lost? That whistle is the reason you're hearing this story right now, and the reason you will never catch me alone in Tonto National Forest again, ever. I went in confident, too. I wasn't some clueless tourist wandering off a marked path. I'd been hiking for years, done solo trips, knew how to read a map, how to handle myself in the backcountry. Tonto was supposed to be another notch on the belt, rugged, beautiful, a couple of nights alone under the stars. No big deal. That's how I treated it. Like a challenge I'd already beaten in my head. The first day was fine. Better than fine, actually. You know that feeling when the trail gets quiet enough that your thoughts start sounding loud? That's where I was. Just the crunch of my boots, the occasional bird, wind moving through the junipers. No signal on my phone, but I'd expected that. I had a physical map, a compass, and that bright orange whistle clipped to my chest strap, bumping against me with each step like a little badge of security. I set up camp in a clearing not far from a dry wash, about 3 miles in. It was one of those spots that looks like it was waiting for you. Flat ground, a few trees for shade, enough sky to see the stars. I cooked, cleaned up, hung my food, did everything by the book. As the sun went down, the forest shifted into that strange, hollow quiet. You know, the one where every sound suddenly feels heavy, and the silence is its own kind of noise? That first night, I heard coyotes, owls, little rustles in the brush, normal forest stuff. I'm not going to lie and say I wasn't a little on edge. Being alone does that, but it was manageable. I zipped into my tent, listened to the night for a while, and eventually drifted off. It was the second day when things shifted. Around mid-afternoon, the wind started picking up, and the sky turned this washed-out pale color that made everything look flat. The trail wound along a ridge with a pretty steep drop on one side, thick forest on the other. I stopped for water and checked my map, just to confirm I was where I thought I was. Everything lined up, no reason to be nervous. Still, there was this feeling. It was subtle at first, like the forest was too quiet, but not in the usual way. I kept catching myself turning around, convinced I'd hear another set of footsteps behind me, but nothing was there. Just trees, rock, some scrub. I told myself it was just my brain looking for patterns. Being alone does that. You start talking yourself into shadows. At one point, the trail dipped and twisted through a tighter section of trees. The wind died completely, like someone had shut a door behind me. I stopped walking just to listen, and that's when I decided to test the whistle. I don't even know why. Boredom, maybe. Or wanting to feel like I had some control over that silence. I lifted it to my lips and blew 3 sharp blasts, the standard distress pattern. The sound cut through the trees, high and shrill, echoing off the slope. I stood there, looking around, feeling weirdly proud of how official it sounded. Then, about 5 seconds later, from somewhere ahead of me, deep in the trees, came 3 sharp blasts in the exact same rhythm. Not an echo. Not the same sound bouncing back. This was a new set of whistles. Same timing, same tone, same pattern. Like someone had stood there, listened, and copied what I did. You know that sensation when all the warmth drains out of your body at once? That hollow dropping feeling in your chest? That's what hit me. I just stood there, whistle still between my fingers, looking at the direction the sound came from. It was too far away to see anything. No movement, no color, just dense green and brown. Rational brain kicked in first. Maybe another hiker, maybe a ranger, maybe somebody heard me and responded. That's what the whistle is for, right? That's the whole point. So I forced my voice to sound normal and called out, "Hello, you out there?" Silence. No crunching footsteps. No answer. Just that dead, padded forest quiet. Part of me wanted to call again, but another part, the part that actually cared if I stayed alive, told me to shut up. If it was a person, they'd say something. They'd respond. That's what people do when they help. Whoever or whatever blew that whistle didn't want to identify itself. I kept walking, but the air felt different now, heavy, watching. I stayed on the trail, moving a little faster than before, kept glancing over my shoulder. Every now and then, I'd hear a branch creak or something shift in the distance, and my brain would automatically map it to where that whistle had come from. About 20 minutes later, I stopped to check my bearings again. That's when curiosity got the better of me. I raised the whistle and blew a single, long note. The sound tore through the trees, and I immediately regretted it. This time, the answer came from behind me. One long note, same pitch, same length, no delay, like it had been waiting. I spun around so fast my pack almost threw me off balance. Nothing there. Just the trail stretching back between the trees, empty. The skin on the back of my neck felt tight, like it was pulling. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. That was the moment it stopped feeling like a weird coincidence and started feeling like a game. Something was playing with me, matching me. I didn't blow the whistle again for the rest of the afternoon. I just walked. I walked until my legs burned, put as much distance between myself and that stretch of trail as I could. I kept thinking, if I just got far enough, it would stop. Like moving away from a bad cell signal. By the time I picked a spot to camp for the night, the light was already thinning. I rushed the setup tent, food, everything with that feeling in my chest that something was closing in alongside the sun. I tried to be methodical, but my hands weren't steady. Little mistakes slipped in. A knot tied sloppier than usual. A corner of the tent not staked as tight as it should have been. Nothing huge, but enough to remind me I wasn't as in control as I liked to think. Once it got dark, the forest changed. You know that thin membrane between alone but safe, and alone and not safe? It felt like I'd stepped through it without realizing. The sounds outside the tent were different. Closer. Too deliberate. A twig snapping. Then nothing for a long time. A soft scrape. Then silence. Not random animals crashing around. Something pacing its sounds. I tried to distract myself, ate a little, scrolled through old photos on my phone even though I had no signal. Anything to make that thin polyester wall feel like more than it was. The whistle lay right next to me, on top of my sleeping bag. At some point, I don't know why I picked it up, turned it over in my hands. That stupid bright orange-looking, almost neon, in the light of my headlamp. I told myself, if something happens, if you need help, this is what you use, that's what it's for. But another voice in my head whispered, it's not for you anymore. I don't know how long I lay there, just listening, breathing shallow, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Then, somewhere out in the dark, close enough that it didn't sound faint, but far enough that I couldn't pinpoint it, I heard it. 3 sharp blasts. My pattern. The exact pattern I'd used hours earlier. My body locked up. I didn't even breathe. The sound wasn't muffled, wasn't distant. It was clear. Too clear. Like whoever did it wasn't afraid of me knowing how close they were. A long stretch of silence followed, so total that the ringing in my ears from the sound felt loud. I remember thinking, don't move, don't answer, don't even look at the whistle. Then, from another direction slightly to the left, deeper in the trees came the same 3 blasts. Identical timing, identical pitch. And then, after another unbearable pause, from somewhere else, entirely farther back, maybe toward the ridge, 3 more. It took me a second to understand. It wasn't one thing mimicking me. It was multiple. Or it wanted me to think it was. The forest had become this map of invisible mouths, all knowing my signal, all speaking in my language. I felt this pressure building in my chest, a primal urge to respond, to call back like you do when someone shouts your name. But there was something underneath it, a heavy, instinctive warning. You know when a dog refuses to go through a doorway because it senses something you don't? That's what it felt like inside my own mind. I lay there, every muscle tight, staring at the ceiling of the tent as if I could see through it. Outside, the whistles kept going. Not constant, not overlapping. Just taking turns. One here. A pause. One there. Another. Each one in that exact rhythm I'd used earlier in the day, like a circle tightening. The worst part wasn't the sound. It was the pattern. They never blew first. They were waiting for me to do it. Waiting to follow. Waiting to play the game again. Every blast was a reminder. We heard you. We learned you. We are still here. At one point, I realized there was another noise underneath the whistles. Something I'd missed at first because my brain was so locked on to that shrill sound. A faint, almost too soft to hear rustling, timed with each blast. Not just one rustle, many, scattered around me. Whatever was out there wasn't staying still. I don't know how long it went on. Time stopped meaning anything. The dark pressed in, my throat was dry, and my hand had cramped from clenching the sleeping bag. At some point, whether from exhaustion or sheer mental burnout, I must have drifted off in these broken, shallow snatches of sleep. When dawn finally seeped through the fabric of the tent, it felt unreal, like I'd hallucinated the whole thing. The light made everything small again, manageable. But the feeling in my chest didn't go away. That wrongness stayed. I stepped out, half expecting to find tracks, some sign that I wasn't losing my mind. The ground around my campsite was disturbed. Sure, but that could have been me, or animals, or the wind. Nothing clear, nothing obvious. But when I took a few steps away from the tent and really looked, something hit me. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no insects, no morning chatter. Just a thick, padded stillness, like sound itself was holding its breath. That kind of silence doesn't happen in a place like Tonto, unless something has convinced everything else to shut up. I didn't cook breakfast, didn't linger. I tore that camp down faster than I ever have in my life. Stuffed everything half properly into my pack, checked my map once, and started hiking out. No photos, no breaks. No turning the whistle over in my hands like some talisman. I didn't blow it again, not once. The whole way back, I could feel it clip to my chest strap, tapping against me with every step. A little metronome counting down the distance between me and the trailhead. And every time the wind shifted, brushing past my ears in a high, thin whistle, I forced myself not to react to. I couldn't shake one thought. Out there, something heard me announce myself. Something learned my voice in the only language it needed. And the scariest part? If you ever go deep enough into Tonto, and you get nervous, and you bring your lips to a whistle, thinking it'll keep you safe, you might not be the only thing in those trees that remembers the pattern. You ever walk into a place and feel, instantly, that you were never supposed to see it? Not because it's dangerous or off-limits on a map, but because it feels like you just barged into a room where something was already in the middle of whatever it does when nobody's watching. That's the feeling that still makes my skin crawl when I think about that campsite in Tonto National Forest, the one that shouldn't have been there. The one that, according to everyone who went back with me, never existed. We weren't far off the grid. At least not by Tonto standards. It was a family trip, me, a couple of relatives, and two younger kids who had been begging for a real forest camping weekend. We picked a developed campground first, but everything decent was booked. So one of us suggested what sounded like a great compromise: drive a bit deeper in, park where we could, and hike out to find a quiet spot away from the crowds. Just us, the trees, and a sky full of stars. It sounded like a brochure. We checked a map, saw that we were nudging into an area that was marked limited access, but not outright forbidden. No huge warning signs, no "do not enter or you will die" messages. Just a line that made it clear this wasn't for beginners. We figured we'd be careful, stick to obvious paths, and not go too far. That was the plan. The kids were excited, racing ahead down the trail, pointing at weird rocks and bugs, completely oblivious to how fast the light shifts out there once afternoon starts leaning toward evening. Tonto doesn't fade slowly. One minute the forest feels open and sunlit, the next, it's like the shadows get weight to them. About an hour in, we'd veered off the main trail onto what looked like an old, overgrown footpath. It was subtle, barely there in places, but you could tell people had used it once. Broken branches at shoulder height, that kind of thing. One of us said, "This probably just leads to an old campsite or something," and that put the idea in everybody's heads. Find a forgotten little spot, make it ours for the night. We came over this slight rise, through a narrow gap between two boulders, and there it was. It looked like something out of a catalog. Perfectly flat ground, surrounded by tall pines, a fire pit made of river stones, with embers still faintly glowing under a layer of ash. Two folding camp chairs, facing each other. A tent, fully set up, zipped shut, with a small lantern hanging from one of the poles. A cooler. A pair of hiking boots placed neatly beside a log, laces loose, like someone had just slipped them off to relax. And no one there. You know how your brain tries to autofill explanations? We all did it at once. Maybe they went to get water. Maybe they're on a quick hike. Maybe they're in the tent napping. Every excuse came out, because the alternative, the idea that this was all left, perfectly arranged, and abandoned, felt wrong on a level we didn't want to touch. The kids thought it was cool. One of them ran ahead to the fire pit and said, "It's warm." And when I stepped closer, they were right. Not hot, not freshly poked, but definitely not cold. Whoever had been there couldn't have left more than, an hour or two ago? Less? We called out. Announced ourselves. "Hello? Anyone here? Just passing through?" Forest etiquette. You don't just invade someone's space without saying something. No answer. Just the soft hiss of the barely alive fire and the distant hush of wind moving far above us through the canopy. The first real crack in the normalcy came from something small. There was a mug on the ground near one of the chairs. You could see the shape of a liquid line, dried around the inside. Coffee, probably. But when I bent closer, I saw a thin skin of moisture still clinging to the bottom. Whatever had been in there hadn't been gone long. That's when unease started to seep in around the edges of curiosity. One of the adults said we should leave it alone. "We'll just find our own spot," they said. "No reason to hang around someone else's camp." The kids protested immediately. This place was too perfect. The tent was already there. The fire was already built. We could literally sit down and relax. The argument lasted maybe a minute before someone suggested we at least check the cooler. Not to steal anything, just to look. To confirm this was just a normal campsite and not, something else. I wish we hadn't. The cooler wasn't locked, just latched. Inside were drinks, food, ice packs, half melted. Everything looked completely ordinary. Right down to a half-wrapped sandwich with a bite missing. Like someone had set it down mid-chew and just never came back to it. No bugs, no mold. Too recent. I remember the silence between us after the cooler lid dropped shut. It was different now. Heavier. All the little signs added up to one big, impossible question. Where did they go? One of us finally said the thing everyone was thinking. What if something happened to them? That's when the vibe shifted from uneasy curiosity to a cold, practical kind of fear. If someone was lost, hurt, or worse out there, we were now part of that story, whether we liked it or not. You can't just walk away from what looks like an active camp and pretend you never saw it. We decided to do the responsible thing. Mark the location, head back to where we had signal, and report it. We took photos of the campsite from a distance. No one opened the tent. Nobody wanted to be the one to see what was inside. We told the kids we were going to go back, get a ranger, and then maybe come camp again at a different spot. They weren't happy about it, but even they could sense something was off. Walking back, the forest felt tighter. You know when every tree seems to lean in a little too close? Branches that were just scenery on the way in now looked like arms. Shadows seemed to hold shape for half a second longer than they should. We moved faster than before, no one wanting to fall to the back of the line. Eventually, bars popped back up on the phone. We made the call, gave coordinates as best we could, described everything we'd seen. The person on the other end took it seriously, said they'd send someone to check. asked us to wait at a nearby turnout to talk to a ranger in person. When the ranger pulled up, you could tell from his face this wasn't the first weird call he'd taken, but something about this one bothered him. He asked for every detail: how far we'd hiked, how we found the path, what the camp looked like, how fresh everything seemed. Then he asked a question that stuck with me. Did you go in the tent? When we told him no, I swear I saw the smallest flicker of relief in his eyes. He told us to sit tight, said he'd go in with another ranger who'd just arrived, and that they'd hike in, confirm the situation, and come back to update us. The kids were starting to get chilled, the sun dropping faster now, shadows stretching long, an hour out, an hour back. We told them we'd wait. Those 2 hours felt like 5. The forest around that turnout might as well have been a wall. Cars would occasionally pass by on the road, but other than that, it was just us, and this growing unease that kept circling around the same thought. What if we led them into something bad? When the rangers finally got back, it was already getting dark. We could see from their faces before they even spoke that something was wrong. Not the panicked, "We found a body" wrong. The confused, unsettled wrong of someone whose reality has been messed with. They hadn't found it. Not, they couldn't find the path. Not, someone else must have packed up and left. They said, there was no campsite. No fire pit. No tent. No boot prints that matched what we'd described. They found one small clearing that could maybe have been where we were talking about, but the ground wasn't disturbed like it should have been. No soot, no logs dragged for seats, nothing. We didn't take that answer quietly. One of us pulled out a phone and showed them the photos we'd taken, clear shots of the fire pit, the chairs, the cooler, the tent. The ranger stared at them for a long time, his thumb hovering over the screen, like he was afraid to touch it. "This is where you were?" he asked. "Yes, those rocks, those trees, it's the same spot." He went quiet, then said something very carefully. "Those firestones, they're not there now. And that tree," he pointed at a twisted pine in the background, "came down in a storm a couple years back. It's on its side. Been that way a while." That's when the cold really hit. We had photographs, taken a couple of hours before, of a tree standing upright in a place where, according to a ranger who'd worked this forest for years, it had been lying on the ground long enough to rot. We went back and forth with them until the kids started getting freaked out just from the adults' voices. The ranger kept looking at us like he was trying to decide whether we were messing with him, losing it, or telling the truth about something he didn't want to believe. He eventually said, "Look, I'll file a report. We'll send a team out in the morning, grid that area properly. If there's any sign of a camp, we'll find it. For tonight though, I'd strongly suggest you don't go back in." He didn't say why. He didn't have to. We drove out in this weird, heavy silence. You'd think we'd talk it to death, try to rationalize it, but it was like speaking about it too much might make it stronger, more real. The kids nodded off in the back seat, heads bumping gently against the windows. Every mile we put between us and the tree line made me feel a little less like something was breathing against the back of my neck. You'd think that would be the end of it, a strange story, a weird, maybe illusion, something you could write off as group hysteria. If it had ended there, I might have eventually convinced myself that's all it was. But it followed us home. It started quietly, little things. One of the kids woke up a couple nights later and told their parent they'd had a dream about the empty campsite. When asked what they meant, they said, very matter-of-factly, "The one in the backyard with the fire that never goes out." Nothing was in the yard, of course, nothing physically there. Then, a few days after that, one of us found dirt on the back porch, in a rough rectangle, like something heavy had been set down and then dragged away. The kind of disturbance you'd see under the footprint of a cooler or a camp chair. A faint ring of soot near the edge. No one in the house used charcoal. No one had lit anything. The thing that finally snapped whatever thin thread was holding my denial together happened about a week later. I woke up in the middle of the night, that panicked, chest-tight kind of waking where you're convinced something is wrong before you can name it. The room was dark, but there was this faint, flickering glow against the wall. I rolled over and saw, through the thin gap in my curtains, a soft orange light pulsing slowly in the backyard, like fire, small, controlled, campfire-sized. I didn't move for a long time, just watched that light dance on the ceiling, My brain whispered all the reasonable explanations, neighbors, streetlights, a reflection, but none of them fit the slow, natural way that glow shifted. I never got up to look that night, couldn't make myself face whatever I'd see through the glass. In the morning, of course, nothing was there. No burn marks, no ash, just a faint smell of smoke that nobody else seemed to notice. Here's the part that will bother you when you think about going camping in a place like Tonto. Rangers went back and found nothing where we stood, but something we stepped into out there didn't stay put when we left. It came back with us, not as a ghostly figure or a nightmare creature, but as a place. A fully formed campsite, complete with all the quiet implications of people who had been there and then weren't. So if you ever hike deep into Tonto and find a perfect, empty site, chairs set, fire warm, boots placed just, so ask yourself one thing before you get comfortable. Are you arriving? Or are you walking into a moment that's still trying to finish what it started with someone else? And if you decide to just back away and leave it alone, like we tried to, don't be too surprised if, one night, you glance out your own window and see that familiar little circle of firelight waiting patiently, like it finally found where you live. If you've never heard a human scream underwater, your brain is lucky. It doesn't know how wrong that sound is. Most people think of Tonto National Forest as cliffs, pines, desert, heat. But if you know where to look, if you're willing to hike further than the casual campers do, you find water that doesn't feel like it belongs there. Quiet, still, dark lakes, hidden between rock and timber, like secrets someone tried to bury. That's where this started, at one of those lakes, the kind that barely shows up on printed maps and doesn't show up at all on the kind you get on your phone. You need to understand something about me before this makes sense. I didn't go out there to chase ghosts or monsters. I wasn't looking for anything supernatural. I went out there to film a dive. It was supposed to be just another video for a small outdoor channel a few of us ran. We did gear reviews, trail guides, hiking and camping spots, that kind of thing. Views weren't huge, but we had a solid audience. And one day, buried in the comments of a random video, there was this message. If you think you really explored Tonto, go dive the old lake near location redacted. Someone lost a trailer in there in the 70 seconds. See if it's still down there. Most people would scroll past that. We didn't. It became this idea that kept coming up whenever we planned the next trip. We should find that trailer. Imagine the thumbnail if we actually see it. Those old time capsule videos do crazy numbers. We did some digging, asked around in a couple local forums, talked to someone who'd been a kid in that area back then. The story lined up just enough to hook us. Flash flood, washed out access road, somebody's camper trailer, going over the edge and vanishing into the lake. No one died, supposedly. It just fell in and stayed there. We hiked in early, carrying more weight than usual. Tanks, fins, masks, the waterproof housing for the camera. The lake, when we reached it, looked wrong, in exactly the way that makes your spine tighten. Too still. The surface was this flat, dark mirror that barely reflected the sky. No birds skimming it, no insects bouncing off it. The tree line came right down to the edge, like the forest was leaning over to look in, and then decided not to get any closer. You know that feeling when you're standing on the edge of something deep, and your body leans back just a little on its own? That gentle recoil? That started the second I saw the water. That part of my brain that isn't impressed by internet views whispered, this is a bad idea. But we'd already come this far. The others were busy cracking jokes, arguing about where the trailer might have sunk, pointing out likely spots. I kept my mouth shut, told myself it was just ordinary nerves. New environment, unfamiliar depth, reduced visibility, dive 101 stuff. Even from shore, the lake dropped off fast. A couple of feet from the edge, you couldn't see the bottom anymore, just murky, green-black, swallowing light. We suited up, checked each other's gear, regulators, straps, gauges. The camera went on last, clipped to my chest, angled slightly downward to catch everything. Sliding into that water felt like lowering myself through a sheet of cold glass. It wasn't freezing, but it was colder than it should have been for that time of year. That much sun. There's a kind of cold that feels clean, refreshing. This wasn't that. This felt heavy, like it sank into my joints. The first few meters were just suspended silt and wandering sunbeams. My bubbles climbed past my face in silver trails. I kept glancing down, waiting for the moment the lake floor would resolve into view. It didn't, not right away. It's hard to explain how disorienting that is, to keep descending while your brain insists you should have hit bottom by now. The light above started to fade into a dull circle. The others were just shadows to my left and right, beams from their lights cutting through the murk in pale cones. Finally, maybe 20, 25 feet down, the world below stopped being just darkness. A gray-brown expanse emerged. Soft mud, scattered rocks, the occasional branch. We leveled out, adjusted weight, started moving. Every sound is different underwater. Your own breath becomes this loud, constant machine in your head. The hiss-in, roar-out of air moving through your regulator. The small creaks of gear, the distant, muted thuds when you bump something. All of it combined with that muffled silence that made the pressure in my ears feel heavier than it should. We moved slow, sweeping our lights. For a while, it was nothing but mud and the occasional piece of submerged trash, an old tire, a beer can half buried. I remember thinking, this is ridiculous. The story was probably just that, a story. Then the ground ahead curved downward in a way that made my stomach drop. A deeper section. A basin, maybe. The silt sloped away into darker water, and just at the edge of where my light reached, I saw it. Corners. Straight lines. Edges that didn't belong to rocks or roots. The trailer sat tilted at an angle on the slope, nose down, back end slightly elevated, like it had tried to stay afloat for a second before giving up. The white paint had long since gone gray-green with algae and age. The windows were dark holes. One of the wheels was partially visible, half sunk into the mud. A length of rusted chain dangled from the hitch like something that had snapped loose mid-panic. Seeing it there, solid and real, sent a rush of adrenaline through me that almost masked the fear. Almost. We'd done it. We'd found it. The others' light beams swung toward it, bouncing in short, excited gestures. If you watch the footage from that moment, you can hear one of them try to yell something through their regulator, just a burst of bubbles and garbled sound. There's a special kind of wrong that hits when you find something that hasn't been touched in decades, a place sealed off from air, from light, from people. We floated there for a few seconds, letting it sink in. The past, frozen in green water. Then we went closer. The door was half open, hanging crooked on twisted hinges. Silt had piled up just inside the threshold. Something about that dark gap made my chest feel tight, like I couldn't pull a full breath even with a tank on my back. But this was what we'd come here for. I aimed the camera into the doorway, light cutting through the murk. Inside, everything was drowned and softened, but still, somehow, arranged. A table, bolted to the floor. The shapes of cabinets. A warped cushion. Little objects scattered on every surface, furred with algae. A fork, a plate, something that might have been a book, turned to mush. And on the far wall, above where a small window must have been, there was a rectangle just a shade lighter than the rest. Like something had hung there once, shielding the wall from age. A picture, maybe. Something someone cared about enough to stare at while they sat inside this box, never imagining it would end up here. One of us slipped inside first, kicking up a storm of silt that rolled through the beam of my light like underwater smoke. I followed, one hand hovering near the edge of the doorway, careful not to snag anything. The temperature dropped another few degrees as soon as I crossed that threshold. It felt like stepping into a memory that didn't want me there. We moved slow, cautious. Every fingertip touch on a surface released little clouds of decay. The camera caught everything, the way fabric disintegrated at a gentle nudge, the slow drift of particles like flecks of old time flaking off. In the back, where the sleeping area would have been, I saw a journal, or what was left of one. It lay half open on a shelf, pages fused together, cover bloated, but still holding. Something about it pulled at me. Words. A voice from before. I reached out, pinched it carefully between gloved fingers, and angled it toward my light. The pages didn't separate. But on the inside of the front cover, where the water hadn't had as much time to eat everything away, there were still faint lines. Ink. Blurred and blue, but legible in short fragments. You know how your eyes will lock onto certain phrases, skipping over the rest? That's what happened. I couldn't get full sentences, just broken pieces. Lake, not right. Sounds at night, under the water. It wants. Pulled. That was enough. My hand started shaking. Not from cold, not from exertion, from a feeling I can only describe as recognition. Like I'd just been introduced to something those people in the 70 seconds had already met, and they'd tried to leave a warning that never made it to the surface. Behind me, something moved. It wasn't a sound, not in the way you're used to thinking about sound. It was a shift in pressure, the tiniest vibration in the water that passed along my skin. The way the silt on the floor curled and twisted, like a breath had been exhaled somewhere close. My light beam swung toward the doorway on instinct. For a second, just one blurred, heart-stopping second, I saw a shape outside the trailer that wasn't one of us. It wasn't clear. Not in that murky water. Could have been a trick of light. Could have been my own fins throwing shadow. But it looked vertical. Thin. As tall as the trailer, but narrower. Like a dark column that tapered where a head should be. It was there, and then it wasn't, vanishing as the disturbed silt caught my light. My breathing spiked, bubbles roaring out faster than they should. One of the others touched my arm, the universal, "You good?" signal. I forced a tiny okay sign back, even though nothing in me was okay. We should have left then. We should have backed out, surfaced, pretended we hadn't seen enough to make a decent video already. But greed is a quiet thing. Curiosity is louder. Just a little more, I thought. Just a quick sweep around the back. We exited the trailer and swam along its side, following the slope of the basin. The mud dropped away into deeper darkness. I shone my light down and saw nothing but that endless fall-off. It felt like staring into a throat. And that's when the lake made a sound. It started low. Not a roar, not a crack, not anything you'd recognize. More like humming, a vibration deep in the water that turned the lake itself into a speaker. It was so subtle at first, I thought it was the blood rushing in my own ears. Then it grew, just enough to be felt more than heard. The silt around the base of the trailer began to stir on its own. Not from our fins, it rose in thin spirals, as if pulled upward by something deeper pulling downward, like the lake was inhaling. The journal, still in my hand, flexed slightly, pages rippling as the water moved through it. Those half-words on the cover looked different in the shifting light. Wants stood out clearer. One of us signaled to head up, thumb pointed at the surface. The others nodded. When my body turned to start ascending, my light swept over the basin one more time. There were shapes down there now. Not defined, not close enough to see clearly. Just impressions against the darkness. Columns, vertical, arranged in a loose, uneven circle far below. Like standing stones in the deep. Between them, movement. Something pale, slow, not shaped like any fish I've ever seen. The light barely kissed them. But whatever that glow touched recoiled, sliding back into the dark. That's when the hum changed. It rose in pitch, just slightly, and for the first time, it stopped sounding like nothing I'd heard before and started sounding like something very specific. It sounded like a voice trying to form words through a closed mouth. I wanted out. Every survival instinct in me was screaming now, loud enough to drown out even my own raspy breathing. We kicked upward, bubbles streaming past our faces. The pressure in my ears eased with every foot. The light above grew brighter, gentler. Then, from below us, muffled and stretched by water, but unmistakably human-shaped, came the sound of someone screaming. It wasn't any of us. You can hear it on the video, our breathing, our grunts, and underneath, wrong and distant and echoing, in a way sound isn't supposed to, underwater, this long, tearing wail. It rose up from the basin, chasing us. It didn't sound like fear. It sounded like rage, frustration, hunger. I didn't look back down. We broke the surface hard, gasping even though we had plenty of air left in our tanks. The lake was flat again, as if nothing had moved beneath it. No ripples. No disturbance. The trees leaned over, just as quiet, just as uninterested. We got out. We stripped gear in record time. No one made jokes now. No one even said much. The journal, I don't remember dropping it, but it wasn't with us when we reached the shore. Part of me wonders if I ever really held it at all, or if the lake had just pushed those words into my head from something that had turned to pulp decades ago. Later, when we reviewed the footage, the camera showed more than we'd registered in the moment. The trailer, the interior, the half-legible cover. the way silt rose in slow, deliberate curls around us. And at the very edge of one frame, just before we turn to ascend, there's a glimpse of something down in that basin. Not a clear shot. Not enough to throw on a thumbnail and claim we caught a monster on camera. Just a suggestion. A pale shape, too long in one direction, too thin in another, unfurling itself between those darker columns of whatever they were. As the light grazes it, it recoils in a way that makes your skin crawl, warping backward like it's pulling its limbs in. The audio caught the hum. It recorded the scream. When you play it back on normal speakers, it just sounds like distorted feedback. But if you put on headphones, crank it up, and listen very carefully, there's a moment, just a fraction of a second, where the distortion folds in on itself, and you almost hear a word. Not English, not any language you'd recognize. Just this awful, drawn-out shape of sound that feels like being dragged downward by the ankles. We didn't upload that video. There's a folder on a drive, sitting there, unlisted, with the raw files. Sometimes I think about deleting it. Sometimes I think about what would happen if it vanished on its own. Because here's the part that makes it hard to sleep when your room is quiet and dark. That lake isn't famous. It's not crowded. There's no sign with a skull and crossbones. People still hike past it, toss rocks into it, maybe strip down and swim on a hot day if they're brave or stupid enough. They look at that smooth surface and see something peaceful, calming. They can't hear what's humming under it. But now you've heard enough of it that if you ever find yourself by a lake in Tonto where the air feels too still and the water feels too heavy, and you feel that tug in your chest to go closer, just remember, somewhere down there, in a trailer that never made it back to shore, somebody tried to write down what it wants. And whatever it was, whatever it is, hasn't gone anywhere. It's still waiting, patient and heavy and deep, for the next sound of air bubbles rising from a human throat. If you ever go camping in a place like Tonto, you get used to rangers. The hats, the uniforms, the clipboard, the casual authority. They become part of the background, helpful, familiar, forgettable. You don't expect one of them to follow you through the forest after he's already been dead for 40 years. There were 4 of us that weekend. College friends, the kind of group that thinks experience on a few popular trails means they're outdoors people now. We picked Tonto because we wanted something that felt wild without being stupidly dangerous. We found a semi-remote area, not totally off-grid, but far enough from the main campground that we could pretend we were rugged. From the start, the forest felt watchful, not in a dramatic way, just in that subtle, under-the-skin way where you keep checking over your shoulder even though you haven't heard anything behind you. The kind of tension you can shrug off in daylight. We were maybe 1.5 miles from the trailhead when we met him. He stepped out from between 2 pines, like he'd just been waiting for us to reach that exact spot. Tall, lean, older. Gray hair at the temples. Standard ranger uniform, hat, shirt, badge, dark green pants. Clipboard in one hand, pen in the other. The first thing that registered wasn't how he looked. It was how calm he made everything feel. "Afternoon," he said, like he'd known us for years. "You folks camping out here?" You know how sometimes a stranger's voice instantly makes you feel safe? That's what it was like. Warm, steady, practiced. We slowed down, shifted our packs, said yeah, we were setting up for the weekend. He nodded, glanced over us like he was checking inventory. "Good. We've had issues with people wandering off trail, getting turned around. Mind if I get some information for the log, just in case we need to find you?" None of us questioned it. It sounded official in that casual government way. He asked our first names, approximate ages, where we were planning to camp, near the creek, off the ridge. We guessed how many nights we'd stay, when we intended to leave. He wrote everything down on the clipboard, neat and methodical. "Last thing," he said, "let me get a head count." He looked at each of us in turn, tapping the pen lightly against his board. 1, 2, 3, 4. A small, satisfied smile. "Perfect. Try not to change that number." We laughed. He didn't. He gave us some normal-sounding advice: fire safety, where not to drink water from, the fact that temperatures drop faster than people expect. Before he walked away, he glanced back once and added, "If you hear anything strange at night, don't leave your tent just to chase a sound. It's never worth it." Then he disappeared back into the trees. We talked about him for maybe 5 minutes, how nice he seemed, how old school his vibe was. One of us joked that he felt like a ranger from an old movie or something. His uniform looked like it could have been on a retro postcard. Then, we forgot about him. The day passed in that pleasant blur of hiking, setting up camp, arguing over where to put the tent, collecting wood. The forest around us felt big, but not threatening. Distant birds, occasional crackle of something moving in the underbrush. The soundtrack of nature, you tell yourself, means everything is fine. It wasn't until later, after the light started bleeding out of the sky, that we saw him again. We were sitting around the fire, half-cooked food in our laps, when a beam of light slid between the trees. Not bright, just a soft white that cut through the dim. The ranger's flashlight. He stepped into the edge of our sight like he'd timed his arrival to our dinner. "Evening," he said, same tone as before. "Mind if I step in?" We made space automatically. He didn't come all the way into the circle of firelight, just stood at the perimeter, that clipboard still in his hand. It struck me then that I hadn't seen him without it. It was like part of his body. "Just checking in," he said. "Want to confirm you ended up where you meant to be?" We told him, yeah. This was the creek area we'd mentioned. He nodded, scanned around our site, eyes pausing on each sleeping bag laid out, each pack leaning against a tree. Something about his gaze was too precise, like he was making sure every piece was where it should be. He asked us the same questions again. Not all of them, just enough to make it feel like a routine check. "First names?" he said. We went around. He repeated each one under his breath, eyes flickering to his clipboard. "And you're still here, for 2 nights?" We nodded. "Plan on leaving Sunday?" Another round of nods. Then he said, casual as anything, "Let me just get that head count one more time." He pointed with his pen as he counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. Same small, satisfied smile. "Good. Stay at 4. He left after that. No spooky warning, no weird comment, just, "Have a good night. Call out if you need anything." One of my friends whispered, after he disappeared, "Dude really loves counting, huh?" We laughed, but it didn't land as hard this time. There was something about the repetition that felt off. Rangers want information, sure. But twice, the same day, in the middle of nowhere? We told ourselves it was protocol. Maybe they'd had missing hikers recently. Maybe he'd been chewed out in some meeting, and now he was taking it extra seriously. We let the conversation drift, let the fire die down, eventually crawled into the tent. The forest woke up in a different way after midnight. The air felt thicker, sounds carried differently. You know that sensation when you wake up and you're not sure what stirred you, but you're instantly aware that everything around you is too quiet and too loud at the same time? That's how it was. The regular nighttime chorus had thinned out. No insects buzzing near our ears, no distant owl, just this blanket of muffled atmosphere. Then, somewhere out under the trees, I heard a voice. Calm, familiar. "Hey there, campers. Everything all right?" The ranger. I could picture him perfectly, standing just outside the ring of where our fire used to be. Flashlight in one hand, clipboard in the other. It sounded like he was talking to us, but he wasn't close enough to see the tent. His voice came from just beyond that thin nylon barrier, the way an adult might speak to kids who've woken up frightened. My instinct was to unzip the flap, poke my head out, answer him. That's what you do when someone in authority talks to you, right? You respond? But something stopped me. That stray memory of his words from earlier. If you hear anything strange at night, don't leave your tent just to chase a sound. I held my breath. A second voice beside me whispered, "You hear that?" Another mumbled, "It's the ranger." We all stayed still. He spoke again, voice a little closer this time. "Just doing one last check. Need to make sure I got the numbers right." The crunch of footsteps on pine needles came slowly, deliberately, not wandering, not uncertain. Each step was placed like he already knew where everything was. The sound circled the tent, unhurried. The beam of his flashlight glowed faintly through the fabric as it passed by. A soft, hazy line moving along the seams. I watched it like a predator's shadow. "Let's see here," he said, voice thoughtful. "Roll call." His feet stopped. 1. I felt the weight of his gaze through the tent wall. He was counting our shapes in the dark. The beam moved. 2. It moved again. 3. It paused, held on that spot longer. Then, very slowly, it slid to where my head lay. 4, he said, almost with relief. Then, softer, even more quietly, so that for a second I thought I was imagining it. Still 4. He walked away after that. No goodbye. No reminder about safety. Just footsteps retreating until they merged with the forest's background noise. None of us slept much after that. In the morning, everyone pretended it had been no big deal. He's just thorough, one of us said. At least we know someone's out here keeping track. We made breakfast. Packed a small day bag. Decided to hike a bit further up the ridge before circling back. We didn't see the ranger all day. No flashlight, no calm voice emerging from the trees. The silence made it easy to convince ourselves we'd been weird for being weird about him. Until we ran into the current ranger. He was younger, different build, different face. We crossed paths near a marked junction, and after a quick hello, we mentioned, kind of offhand, that one of his colleagues had already checked on us. We described him. The older guy, gray at the temples, clipboard, old-fashioned uniform. The ranger frowned. Out here? He asked. Yeah, we said. Yesterday afternoon. Then again near camp. Older guy, really serious about head counts. He stared at us a moment, then gave this short, humorless laugh. You're messing with me. We all shook our heads. He shifted his weight like he was trying to decide how much to say. Then, you just described someone who hasn't worked this forest in decades. Uniform like that? Clipboard? They phased that stuff out a long time ago. And? He stopped. And what? I asked. He hesitated. We've got a picture back at the station, he said slowly. Old group photo. Some folks like to tell stories about one of the guys in it. Went missing back in the 80 seconds during a search and rescue. Took a group of volunteers out looking for 4 college kids who didn't come back to their campsite one night. Silence. Not even whine through the branches. My skin prickled. He went on, voice lower now. They found the 4. Bodies, I mean. Scattered. Like they'd bolted in different directions. No sign of what they were running from. The ranger leading the search never made it back. They say he got turned around, kept trying to find everyone, walked himself right off the maps. One of my friends tried to make a joke. So what? You're saying we met a ghost? It sounded weak, even to us. The ranger shrugged, but his eyes were serious. I'm saying you met someone I'd really like to speak to, if he's actually walking around. You said he was big on head counts? We nodded. Then do yourself a favor, he said. Don't let that number change. We cut the hike short after that. Something about the story settled over us like a film. Back at camp, we moved differently. Stayed closer together. No one wandered off alone to pee. No one went to just check something out beyond sight. As the afternoon wore into evening, a knot formed in my stomach out of pure, irrational math. 4. We needed to stay. 4. That night, the air felt even heavier. We all heard him come back. The voice slid between the trees, even more familiar now. Evening, campers. Like he'd never left. Last night? The tone was almost conversational. Someone whispered next to me, "Don't answer. Don't say anything." The flashlight beam didn't circle this time. It moved directly to the tent, stopped, held. "You've been good," he said quietly. "Stayed together. That's more than most." Those words chilled me more than any threat could have. More than most. How many had he checked on? How many head counts had started at 4 and ended at less? There was a long pause. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. The fabric of the tent glowed softly with that thin band of light. Then came the sound of paper softly turning. Clipboard pages. 1, 2, 3. The beam of light shifted each time, like he was lining up the numbers with our breathing shapes. 4. Silence. "You keep it at 4, he said. "Tomorrow. All the way back to your car. Don't stop for anything that calls from the trees. Don't split up because someone's taking too long. And if you hear your name from somewhere it shouldn't be," the pen tapped lightly on the board. "Remember, I already counted you. Don't make me have to do it again." The footsteps retreated. The light faded. This time, he didn't come back. In the morning, we packed like our lives depended on it. Maybe they did. We double-checked everything. Headed out as a tight group, no stragglers. When one of us needed to tie a boot or adjust a strap, we all stopped. No one, and I mean no one, stepped off the trail. The forest felt like it was trying. Little noises from just out of sight. A cough that sounded exactly like one of us from behind when we were all in front. A whispered name in a familiar voice coming from the denser trees to the left. We kept walking, eyes forward. 4 shadows, compressed into one tight cluster. At one point, something crashed through the brush to our right, heavy and fast. Pure instinct said, "Look, see what it is." But another instinct, something older, maybe, or borrowed from a man whose job had been to bring people back alive, lashed us into place. We did not break formation. When the parking area finally came into view through the trees, I swear I felt the entire forest recoil, like it had been stretching toward us, and suddenly snapped back. We reached the car, threw our packs in, slammed doors. No one spoke until the road curved and the trees finally thinned out into open sky. Only then did someone say it. Softly, like we were afraid he could still hear us. We stayed 4. Since that day, crowds make me nervous in a way they never did before. Not because of the people, but because sometimes, in stores, or on sidewalks, or in lines, I catch myself counting 1, 2, 3, 4, over and over, checking that everyone I walked in with is still there. And every now and then, when the world goes quiet and I find myself alone, I'll hear it again in my head. That calm, steady voice of a man who never made it back from his last rescue, still out there in Tonto, counting and counting and counting, trying to make sure nobody else ends the way that first group did. So if you're ever camping in those woods, and an older ranger steps out from the trees with a clipboard and a calm smile, asking for your names and your number, answer him. Let him count you. And then, do exactly what he says. Because if he has to come back at night to fix a number that changed, you won't like what he's fixing it from. If you've ever looked at a photo and noticed something in the background that you swear wasn't there in real life, then you already know the feeling that ruined the forest for me. Because the first time I saw that figure, it was just pixels on a screen. The last time, it was standing outside my tent. I work with cameras for a living. Not Hollywood level, nothing glamorous, just field research. Motion-activated trail cams, time-lapse rigs, night vision setups. Tonto National Forest was one of my main areas. I'd spend weeks at a time moving through different sections, swapping SD cards, checking batteries, collecting data. Alone, mostly. Just me, the trees, and my cameras. The thing about trail cams is they don't care about your nerves. They don't get spooked, they don't blink, and they don't look away when something feels wrong. They just watch, quietly, patiently, all night, every night. On this particular rotation, I had 12 cameras spread across a remote section of Tonto, some pointed at known game trails, some at water sources. A couple tucked in odd spots, just to see if anything surprising showed up. They were all set to snap a burst of photos whenever something moved in front of them. After about a month, I brought the first batch of cards home. It's boring work, usually thousands of images of nothing. Wind, shadows, rabbits. The occasional deer or elk, which is the closest thing to excitement you get most weeks. You start clicking through on autopilot, barely seeing them, just scanning for anything unusual. This time, I didn't have to look hard. The first image that stopped me was from camera 3. It watched a narrow corridor between 2 thick stands of pines, a spot where animals tended to funnel through. Night shot, infrared, timestamp 3:47 a.m. A blur on the left side of the frame made me click back, then forward, then back again. There, half caught in motion, was a figure, humanoid, tall, standing just at the edge of the path, half inside the trees. No distinct face, just a pale oval turned toward the camera. Arms long enough that even blurred, they looked wrong. Too much reach. The body was lean, almost stretched. It could have been a person, sure. A hiker, a hunter, someone trespassing. Weird, but not impossible, if this had been near a road or popular trail. It wasn't. That camera was 6-7 miles from anything. In the middle of the night, I told myself, glitch. Misread. Some trick of low light. But I flagged it anyway. Dropped it in a separate folder. Oddities. A couple hours later, scrolling through camera 7, I saw it again. Different angle, different location, same timestamp, 3:47 a.m. This camera faced a small clearing near a creek, maybe 2 miles from the first one. The trees caught in the flash looked like bones. In the dead center of the frame, too clear this time to write off as a blur, was that same tall, thin figure, feet together, arms at its sides, body facing slightly away from the camera, head turned toward it. The eyes, if they were eyes, reflected just enough light to give the impression of 2 faint points. Not animal bright like you see with deer or raccoons. Just awareness. And the worst part? It was closer. Much closer than it had been in the first camera. I checked the metadata 3 times. Same date, same night, same minute, 2 different cameras, miles apart, both catching the same shape at exactly 3:47 a.m. By the time I found it in the footage from camera 9, I stopped pretending it was a coincidence. That one watched an old logging road, mostly overgrown now. Nothing passed through there often. But at 3:47 a.m., the camera snapped a burst. In the first frame, the road is empty. In the second, the figure stands halfway down the road, facing away this time, like it had just appeared mid-step. In the third, it's closer, slightly blurred, as if it moved toward the lens between shots. Then nothing. From that night alone, 3 separate cameras caught it, always at 3:47, always in a different posture, always a little nearer. You know that cold, creeping feeling that starts in your stomach and inches up your spine, one vertebra at a time? That's what went through me as I assembled the images side by side on my screen. Same proportions, same strange thinness, same pale oval of a head turned, in at least one frame, exactly toward me. I told myself it had to be someone messing with me. But nobody knew where all my cameras were. I didn't publish exact locations, and even if someone had somehow found them, there was no way a person could appear on 3 cameras that far apart in the same minute, unless it wasn't moving the way we do. Logic started breaking down at the edges. The part of my brain that deals with data kept trying to file it under explainable, while something older and quieter whispered, no. I should have stopped then, reported it, moved my study area, done literally anything except what came next. I went back out. I told myself it was for answers, to put it to rest, to get clearer pictures and prove it was some camera glitch or a prank, or anything with bones and a heart and a simple explanation. I packed extra batteries, labeled new SD cards, and added one more piece of gear, a small handheld camera for myself. The forest felt different that day. Not louder, not quieter, just attentive. Like a room where everyone stops talking when you walk in. The kind of quiet that's aware of you. I moved from camera to camera, swapping cards, checking mounts. Every time my hand brushed cold plastic, I thought about that figure standing out here alone at 3:47 while I slept in a bed miles away, oblivious. Nothing unusual on the cameras themselves, no signs of tampering, no handprints, no boot tracks around the bases. In some places, the only prints in the dirt were animal tracks and my own from previous visits. I told myself that was reassuring. It didn't feel reassuring. By late afternoon, I'd made it to the last camera in the line, number 12, overlooking a narrow, sandy bend in a dry wash. I lingered there longer than usual, adjusting the angle by a few degrees, pointing it slightly more toward where I'd be camping that night. That was the other bad decision I made. I didn't always camp near my research sites, but sometimes it was practical, especially if I wanted to be on location at first light. That night, I set up in what I thought was a decent spot close enough to the camera that I could reach it in the morning, far enough that I wasn't directly in its field of view. The forest grew thin and gray as the light drained. The shadows pooled low between the trunks. By the time I crawled into the tent, the last smear of color had vanished from the sky. Have you ever been so aware of time that every minute feels like an event? That's how it was. My phone battery was low, so I didn't use it much. I checked it once around 11 p.m., once again around 1. Every time I woke up, I'd stare at the dark ceiling of the tent and think, not yet, not yet, not 3:47. Sleep came in shallow, broken waves. Sound took on that strange, magnified quality it has at night. In the woods, every creak of footstep, every distant crack, A branch snapping inches from your head. Wind pressed against the tent, making the fabric whisper. Sometime after 3, I stopped checking the time. Didn't need to. My body knew. The air felt heavier. The silence outside took on that thick, padded weight you only notice when something is about to happen. And then, very faintly, my own camera's shutter clicked. Just once. A soft, mechanical tick from somewhere beyond the tent wall. My breath caught. I didn't move. Another click. And another. Short bursts now. The pattern my cameras use when something moves in front of them. Whatever it was out there. Near camera 12. Near me. I told myself, stay put. Don't do anything stupid. But curiosity is a disease. Slowly, carefully, I reached for my handheld camera and the small digital display that showed a live feed from 12 sensor, something I'd only set up for field tests, never used seriously before. The screen glowed weakly when it came to life, the night vision image grainy and green. At first, all I saw were trees, the pale arc of the sandy wash, empty. Then, in the next burst of still frames, it stepped into view. You know how some things look wrong even when they don't move? This was like that. Tall. Too tall. Shoulders narrow but not fragile. Arms long enough that hands hung low, near where knees should have been. The head, again that pale oval. But now the impression of features was clearer. Not eyes exactly, but hollows where eyes should be. A darker line where a mouth might be. It stood at the edge of the wash, body angled slightly away from the camera, head turned directly toward it. Toward me. Click. 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 Each burst of photos showed it closer. It didn't move between frames like a person. There was no captured mid-step, no blur of motion. It was here, then nearer again, as if it simply shortened the distance between shots. My heartbeat thudded so hard I could see the screen shaking. I wanted to shut it off, but I couldn't look away. Another set of photos. This time, it was at the very edge of the frame. Too close now for the whole thing to fit. Only part of the torso, the pale segment of the neck, and worst of all, the hint of that face. Click. The next burst wasn't of the wash at all. The angle jolted, skewed. The camera had been jostled, turned slightly, now pointing more toward the darker mass of trees. Just at the edge of the shot, half hidden behind a trunk, something pale curved around into view. Not a head, not exactly, but something head-like, tilting. The line of my tent was faint in the far background. A small, unnatural shape against the ground. Me, it was facing me now. The next series of shots caught nothing but bark. Close. Too close. As if something stood right up against the camera, blocking the lens. After that, nothing. No more movement. No more shutters. But the feeling outside had changed. Have you ever known, with absolute certainty, that someone is standing on the other side of a door you haven't opened yet? That pressure, that awareness, pressed against the thin wall of the tent. I didn't need the cameras to tell me anymore. I could feel it. Something was out there, just beyond the nylon. Not moving, not breathing loud enough for me to hear. Just waiting. Every instinct screamed to stay still. Don't shift. Don't rustle the fabric. Don't let it know you're awake. Then a new sound joined the night. So soft I thought I was imagining it at first. The faintest scratch, low on the tent wall, like a fingertip or a nail, dragged very slowly from one seam to another. It started near my feet and worked its way toward my head in a smooth, unbroken line. The thin material trembled where the pressure passed, not hard enough to tear, just enough to let me know exactly where it was. My throat went dry. I didn't dare swallow. I watched the tiny indentation travel up beside me, stopping inches from where my face lay turned toward the wall. There was a pause. If you've ever felt someone studying you without seeing their eyes, you know what that moment felt like. Then the scratch moved again. This time it traced a careful circle, slow, deliberate. About the size of a human head. It stopped directly opposite my own. I don't know how long we stayed like that, me, afraid to breathe. It inches away, on the other side of a membrane, thinner than a sheet of paper. Time stretched into something ugly and formless. When it finally moved, I almost screamed, not from the sound, but from the release of tension. The pressure on the fabric slid downward, then away. No footsteps, no cracking twigs, just the absence of that heavy awareness, like a weight lifting off my chest. I didn't sleep again before dawn. I watched the faint light slowly seep into the fabric above me, every new shade of gray feeling like a miracle. When I finally crawled out, the world looked ordinary. Birds chirped, the air was cool. Trees swayed. The camera was not where I'd left it. It lay on the ground a few feet from its mount, face down in the dirt. No footprints around it except my own from yesterday. No drag marks, just moved. I picked it up with shaking hands, half expecting it to be smashed. It wasn't. A little scuffed, but intact. Later, when I pulled the card and checked the last few images, they matched what I'd seen in the tent right up until the final shot. The very last photo is almost entirely black, underexposed, but if you crank up the brightness and contrast, fiddle with the saturation, you can just make out a shape in the center. It's too close to focus properly. Just a pale blur with darker pits where features should be. The hint of a long, thin hand at the bottom of the frame, reaching, not toward the camera, past it, toward something behind it, toward where my tent would have been. I pulled every camera out of that section of Tonto that week. Haven't gone back alone since. Sometimes I think about the timestamp more than the thing itself. 3:47 a.m. Not 3, not 4. That precise, meaningless number, except I know it isn't meaningless. Not anymore. Because every so often, when sleep just won't come, and I roll over to check my phone on the bedside table, the screen lights up, and there it is, 3:47. And for a split second, I feel that same pressure against the thin wall of my room, like something has learned to follow the lens home. So if you ever pick up your phone in the dead of night and notice that exact time glowing back at you, don't open your camera app. Don't take a photo to see if anything's there. The problem with cameras is they don't care what they show you. And once you've seen it, it knows exactly how close it can get before you finally notice it standing there. You ever notice how your body knows something's wrong before your brain catches up? That's what this is really about. Not ghosts, not legends, just that sick, crawling moment when your own footsteps don't belong to you anymore. We went into Tonto to prove a point. Two brothers, both stubborn, both tired of hearing people say, "You only like camping because of gadgets." So we decided. No phones, no GPS, no fancy gear, primitive camping, map and compass, knives, tarps, basic food. That was it. If you've ever had a sibling rivalry, you know the vibe. Everything was a competition. Who carried more weight? Who found the better campsite? Who built the cleaner fire? It wasn't mean, but it was constant. That's important, because it meant we knew each other's rhythms. We could recognize each other's gait from far away. Could tell who was walking behind us, just by the sound. The first day went smooth. Sunny sky, dry air, that sharp pine smell that makes you feel like you're breathing cleaner than everyone else. We followed a narrow trail for a while, then cut off into denser forest like we'd planned, using landmarks and the compass. By late afternoon, we'd found a decent spot near a shallow ravine. We set up, cooked, and argued about the best way to rig a tarp when rain wasn't in the forecast. All normal, all fine. If anything felt off, it was so small we laughed it away. The first time I heard it, we were hiking the next morning, single file. I was in front, my brother behind me. The forest was quiet, birds here and there, wind pushing through branches, our boots on dry ground. It was the kind of quiet that settles into your bones in a good way, peaceful. Then there was this extra sound. It took my brain a few seconds to even register it. I'd take a step left, right, left, and each time my boot hit the ground, I'd hear another, softer step, landing just a fraction of a second after mine. Perfectly synced. Like an echo, but not quite. You know how echoes sound stretched out and faint? This wasn't like that. This was solid. Weighty. If you closed your eyes, you'd swear there was someone walking right behind me, trying to match my pace. At first, I thought it was just my brother messing around, trying to step when I stepped as a joke. I slowed down suddenly, waiting for his stride to break. The sound stopped. I started again. The sound came back. I glanced over my shoulder. "You trying to copy me or something?" He frowned. "What?" "The way you're walking. You're like half a beat behind me." He shook his head. "I'm not even watching your feet, man. I'm just walking." We did that awkward stop-start thing a few more times, me testing, him getting annoyed. Every time I paid attention, the double step seemed to vanish. Every time we relaxed back into conversation, it came creeping back in. Step, 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 step. The forest around us felt normal. No sudden cold, no whispering trees, nothing dramatic. Just that extra contact on the ground that didn't have a body attached to it when I looked. By midday, I'd almost convinced myself it was in my head. That's what your brain does. It files weird things under ignore because it doesn't know where else to put them. Then night came, and the forest took that idea and tore it apart. We picked a spot higher up on a ridge, looking down over a slope thick with underbrush. It was beautiful in the late light, everything soft and gold, shadows stretching long and thin. We built a small fire, ate, traded stories, the usual. But I kept noticing something. When I'd stand up to grab more wood, I'd hear one set of footsteps mine. Then, just as I slowed, there'd be an extra crunch of leaves behind me, like someone stopping when I did. Every time I turned, expecting my brother, he'd be on the other side of the fire, sitting. That wrongness started to pile up, little pieces stacking on top of each other until they formed something heavy. "You don't hear that?" I asked finally. "Hear what?" "The extra step. Like mine echoing, but close." He stared at me. Then he did something I'll never forget. He stood up, walked a few steps in a circle around the camp, and we both listened. 4 steps, 4 distinct crunches. Then, when he stopped, there was a fifth, just one, half a beat late. We looked at each other, and in that moment, all the joking stripped away. We heard the same thing. That mattered, because it meant this wasn't just my nerves. We decided not to talk about it anymore that night. Not out of denial, but because saying it out loud felt like feeding it. We agreed to keep the fire small but steady, take turns dozing, stay in the same tent. Inside that thin nylon bubble, every sound was magnified. The wind, the shift of our sleeping bags, the occasional distant crack, normal forest noise. If I held still, I could almost lull myself into thinking we'd just spooked each other during the day and that was it. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. I woke up to silence. Not the normal, layered silence of the woods, not the blanket of soft sounds that blend together. This was different. The kind of silence that feels like someone muted the world. No wind, no insects, nothing. My brother's breathing was slow and even beside me. The small glow from the dying fire seeped through the tent wall, just enough to make vague shapes. Then the footsteps started. They were close, right outside the tent, but they weren't moving past in a line like you'd expect. They were circling. The sound went around us, slow and deliberate. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Pause. Each one matched the weight of a human step. Not heavy like a big animal. Not soft like a deer. Human. I held my breath. Tried to tell myself it was my brother shifting, but his breathing didn't change. The circle tightened. You know how you can tell where a sound is coming from, even with your eyes closed? That sense of location kicked in hard. At one point, the steps were right by my head, less than a meter away, separated from me by only a paper-thin barrier. They stopped there. Nothing moved. I could feel the skin on my arms prickling, the hair on the back of my neck lifting. My body knew exactly how close something was standing. Then I heard it match me. I hadn't realized I was trembling until the sleeping bag whispered against itself. A tiny, involuntary shiver. As if in answer, the ground outside shifted. A soft scrape, like a foot repositioning. I swallowed. My tongue felt like sandpaper. I tried to keep my breaths shallow, quiet. After a few seconds, I forced myself to do something small. I flexed my toes, very gently, inside the bag, just enough that I felt the fabric move. Outside, something answered, a faint scuff in the dirt, like toes flexing inside boots. It was copying me. I didn't speak. Didn't wake my brother. I was terrified that any acknowledgement, any words, would invite it inside. Instead, I lay there, testing it in micro-movements. When I tightened my calf muscle, there'd be the echo of weight shifting outside. When my breathing hitched, there'd be a soft, almost imperceptible grind of grit underfoot. It had the rhythm perfect. The only time it went wrong was when I froze completely, forcing every muscle still. The forest felt like it was holding its breath with me. Seconds stretched. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Then, as if impatient with my lack of response, it took a step on its own. Just one. Heavy. Closer. The tent wall by my face dipped inward slightly, as if something leaned against it from the outside. No outline, no handprint. Just a pressure, a weight. My brother jerked awake with a short, sharp inhale. The pressure vanished. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I couldn't trust my voice. I squeezed his arm instead. Another step sounded, this time near his side. Then another, near our feet. It walked the perimeter again, slow, listening. You know that feeling of someone pacing when they're thinking? That's what it felt like it was considering something. At some point, the steps drifted further away. Not in a straight line, more like they bled into the forest. The distinct crunch became part of the regular night sounds creeping back in. Insects started to chirp. The air loosened. We didn't sleep after that, just lay there in a silent agreement not to unzip the tent for any reason. When the light finally came, weak and gray, it felt like we'd survived something without earning the right to say what. We got out carefully. The campsite looked normal, messy from us, but normal. Then we saw the footprints. They were faint, but they were there. The soil wasn't soft enough for perfect impressions, but around the tent was a rough ring of disturbed ground. Some marks were clearly ours from the night before, but layered over those, lighter, were partial ovals where weight had been. Not enough detail to say shoes, but too uniform to be animal. The part that made my stomach twist was this. In a couple of places, the disturbed patches overlapped perfectly with where our own footprints had been, as if something had stepped exactly where we'd stepped, heel to toe. We broke camp fast, threw things into our packs without the usual banter. The only rule we agreed on was simple. We walk shoulder to shoulder today. No more single file. Nothing behind, nothing ahead. Side by side. It helped a little, but not enough. Because the mimicry changed, instead of matching individual steps, it started matching the group. Whenever we walked in unison, talking, trying to pretend this was all an exaggeration, the sound of our boots blended together, 4 feet hitting dirt, overlapping. But every so often, when the conversation lagged and we just listened, you could hear it. One extra impact, just slightly off, like an echo with no source. Worse, it started separating us by sound. If I took a deliberate, heavy step, I'd hear a single, corresponding thud a beat later. If my brother scuffed a rock, there'd be another small grind after his. It was learning, picking us apart by rhythm. We tried to catch it, stopping suddenly, spinning around, standing still for long stretches. We never saw anything, just trees, brush, the empty trail. The only time we got close was mid-afternoon when we had to cross a narrow, rocky section. We went one at a time, picking our steps carefully. The drop wasn't fatal, but it was steep enough to take seriously. I went first. Each rock I tested wobbled slightly under my weight before settling. Behind me, I heard my brother murmur something and follow. Halfway across, one of the rocks shifted more than I expected. My foot skidded, sending a small spray of pebbles cascading down the slope. I flailed, regained my balance, swore under my breath. Then came a second cascade. Same amount of pebbles, same pattern of sound. But it didn't come from where my brother was. It came from just below me, as if another foot had slipped on an invisible path parallel to mine. We didn't look down. That last stretch back to the car felt like walking out of a mouth. The trees thinning into parking lot, gravel under tires, metal and glass, and other humans. Artificial sounds have never felt so comforting. We didn't talk about what happened for a long time after that. Not properly. We'd say things like, "That trip was weird," or, "Remember when you freaked out about footprints," and laugh it off. But there was always this edge in the laughter. A shared understanding that we were not going back to that part of Tonto. Here's what sticks with me now. More than the footsteps, more than the circling. It wasn't trying to scare us. There were no roars, no growls, no chase. It didn't rock the tent or tear at the fabric. It didn't grab. It didn't even show itself. It studied. It learned our rhythms, found the space between our steps, and slid itself into that gap. Figured out how to move so close to our patterns that if we'd stayed out there longer, I'm not sure we'd have been able to tell which footsteps were ours and which were borrowed. So, if you ever hike deep into Tonto, pay attention to the ground. Listen to the crunch of your boots. Know your own weight, your own rhythm. Because once something out there learns how you sound when you move, all it has to do to get close is walk like you. And by the time you realize you're not the only one making your footsteps, it'll already be standing right beside you, perfectly in step, waiting for you to make the next move so it can follow. You ever have someone give you rules that sound insane in the moment and only make sense when it's way too late? That's what this comes down to. A list of rules at a Tonto National Forest campground that sounded like a joke, right up until something outside our tent started speaking in our voices. It wasn't a wild trip, no deep backcountry, no extreme hiking, just a young couple trying to escape work and noise for a weekend. We picked a developed campground because it felt safer: bathrooms, marked sites, other people around, little numbered posts in the ground. It's hard to be scared when you're next to an RV that probably has a bigger TV than your apartment. We rolled in just before sunset, that perfect golden hour where everything looks harmless. The pines glowed, the air had that cooling down sweetness, and you could hear a couple of distant radios playing low from other campsites. Normal, predictable, comforting. At the entrance, there was one of those wooden boards with faded maps and notices. Usual stuff: fire restrictions, bear warnings, checkout time. But someone had pinned a newer sheet in the corner. Bold black marker across the top: read before nightfall. I skimmed it and half laughed. It wasn't official. Not printed. Just handwritten rules. The kind of thing a bored campground host might make for fun. 1. Do not leave your tent between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. 2. Keep all food locked inside your vehicle. Not in your tent. Not outside. 3. If you hear your name spoken outside after dark, do not respond. 4. If you see someone you know standing outside your tent after midnight, do not open it. Underneath, in smaller writing, these are not jokes. I showed it and said, man, they're really trying the creepypasta angle for tourists now. We both shrugged it off. It felt like one of those campfire stories people tack up to freak themselves out. A minute later, we met him, the campground host. If you've camped at a proper site, you know the type: retired, tan, way too comfortable, living out of a trailer, and wearing a name tag. This guy was older, but not fragile. Weathered, like the trees. He walked over as we parked, smiled polite, but not overly friendly. Evening, he said. Got you down for Site 14? We nodded. He gave the usual spiel about quiet hours and fire restrictions. Then his tone shifted, just a little. You read the board on your way in? He asked. Yeah, I said. The rules. Got us good with the spooky ones. He didn't smile back. They're not for spooking, he said. They're for keeping people from doing the same stupid things over and over. The way he said people made my stomach tighten. Not angry, not even annoyed, just tired. He looked at us for a long second, then added, I'm going to go over them again, and I want you to actually remember them. Okay? We weren't used to being talked to like kids, but something in his eyes made us nod. No leaving the tent between 2 and 4 in the morning, he said. Those are dead hours. You need a bathroom, you go before 2. You hear something, you ignore it. Got it? Sure, we said. All food stays in the car, he went on. Anything that smells like food doesn't go in the tent. Not gum, not chapstick, not wrappers. You don't want anything standing too close. Sniffing around. Bears? I asked. He held my gaze. Let's call it that. I tried to laugh. He didn't. If you hear your name, he said, outside your tent, especially if it sounds like someone you know, it's not. Don't answer. Don't argue with it. Don't tell it to go away. Silence is all it gets. A small shiver crawled up my arms. This wasn't on the official sign. This was his own addition. And if you look out, he said, or think you see somebody you know standing right there, asking to be let in. He paused. It's going to be persuasive. It's going to know things. You keep the zipper shut. You let the sun deal with it. That was the first moment I wanted to leave. We didn't, of course. We were polite. We said thank you. We'll keep that in mind. Appreciate the warning. He watched us a second longer than was comfortable, then finally nodded and walked back to his own spot near the entrance. As soon as he was out of earshot, we did what everybody does in that situation. We made fun of it. Lightly. Nervous jokes. Bet he wears that name tag in his sleep. He probably has a list of rules for brushing your teeth, too. We tried to scrub off the weirdness with sarcasm. But here's the thing, those rules stayed in my head. Even while we were setting up the tent, cooking, laughing, enjoying the evening, those words were like a little bug in my ear. Don't leave the tent between 2 and 4. If you hear your name, ignore it. Night settled in completely. Campsite lights flicked on here and there. Fires burned down to orange cores. You could hear distant laughter and talking for a while, then less and less as people drifted off to sleep. By the time we crawled into the tent, zipped the door, and clicked off our lantern, the forest had taken back the sound. Just wind whispering through branches, the occasional crack from someone's dying fire, a lone car far off once in a while. We fell asleep, tangled in that warm, half-vulnerable way you do in a tent, thin fabric between you and everything else, but somehow it feels safe, because you decided it does. When I woke up, it was dark. That deep, middle-of-the-night dark, where even the sky doesn't have much to say. The first thing I felt was cold air on my face. The second was that prickling awareness that something had shifted. I checked my watch with the smallest movement I could manage. 3:02 a.m. You ever feel your stomach drop without moving an inch? That's what it was like. Dead hours. For a moment, I thought maybe that's what woke me up, the knowledge of the time. Then I heard it. Soft footsteps on gravel. Not right next to the tent, but close. Slow. Unhurried. Crunch. 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 Coming along the little driveway of our site, my brain tried to slot it into campground host on patrol, and almost succeeded. Hosts walk around sometimes. Make sure nobody's blasting music or starting a bonfire. Perfectly normal. Then the footsteps stopped, right outside our tent door. No flashlight glow. No cough, no throat clear. Just the sense of someone standing there. My partner shifted beside me, half awake. "What is it?" they whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to explain the kind of fear that doesn't have teeth or claws, just presence. Then, from the other side of the fabric, we heard my voice. "Hey," it said softly. "You awake?" The world tilted. It was my voice. Not a rough copy, not a distorted impression. The same tone, the same lazy way I stretched certain vowels. It even had that just woke up thickness, like I always have when talking too early. My partner's hand clamped down on my wrist like a vice. They whispered, "Stop. That's not funny." I didn't say anything. I whispered back. Outside, my voice chuckled. The exact same sound I make when I'm trying to reassure someone. "Come on," it said. "Open up." I forgot something in the car. Every hair on my body stood up at once. There was no way for someone outside to not only mimic my voice, but also know that going to the car was something that made sense. My brain started spinning through possibilities. Someone recording me earlier, a speaker, a sick prank, but none of it fit. Inside the tent, I could feel my own chest moving with each breath. It didn't sync with the voice outside. The timing was wrong. 2 separate rhythms. "Hey," the voice repeated, a little firmer. "You hearing me? I need you to unzip this." My partner squeezed my wrist hard enough to hurt. In the barest whisper, they said, "Do not answer it." The rules came back in a rush. If you hear your name, do not respond. As if it knew what I was thinking, the voice shifted tactics. "Look, seriously," it said, sounding more like me than I did. I left my wallet in the car. I don't want to freak the host out walking around without a tag. Just let me out. I'll be right back. The zipper was inches from my face, a simple tug away from opening. I didn't move. Silence settled between us. Outside, inside, even the wind seemed to pause. Then it said my partner's name, perfectly. The way only I say it. The exact cadence. The little stress on the second syllable. The affection that rides under it. My partner flinched like they'd been slapped. "Oh, come on," the voice said. "You know it's me. Who else would say it like that?" The thing is, it was right. It sounded exactly like me. It knew exactly how to press that button. It wasn't just mimicking tone. It was mimicking familiarity. Please, it added, softer now. I'm cold. Something about that broke the spell, just enough for anger to slip in beside fear. I felt my jaw clench. Whoever or whatever was outside the tent was using intimacy like a weapon, using our trust in each other as leverage. In the tiniest whisper, I said, "Count to 100 in your head. Don't react, no matter what it says next." My partner nodded against the pillow. Outside, the gravel crunched as something shifted its weight. The voice lost a bit of its patience. "What's wrong with you two?" it asked. Still wearing my sound. "You think this is funny? Locking me out? You think those dumb rules mean anything?" The way it said dumb rules sounded wrong in my mouth. Off-key. Like a perfect imitation with one note out of tune. It knocked then. Not hard. Just a gentle tap-tap near the bottom of the door. As if testing the distance. The nylon dipped inward slightly at the point of contact. "Okay," it said, sighing. "Maybe you need proof." Then came a story. It started telling my partner about the first time we'd gone camping together. Details. Specifics. The color of the cheap tent we'd used. The way it had rained all night and we'd ended up sleeping in the car. The dumb song we'd sung to stay awake on the drive. Every detail was right. Every word in the right place. Except one. It mentioned a moment that hadn't happened. A tiny thing, me burning my hand on the camp stove that night. I never did. It was small enough to almost slide past, but not quite. My partner's grip on my wrist loosened just a hair. A breath they'd been holding slipped out. "How do you know that?" they breathed. So quietly I barely caught it. Outside, my voice smiled. You could hear it. "Because I was there," it said. "Now, can we stop playing?" I squeezed their hand hard, shook my head, mouthed the word, "No." 2 beats later, they seemed to realize what they'd said. That tiny slip, that response. Outside, the voice went quiet. The air around the tent felt thicker. Very softly, right up against the fabric now, it whispered my name. Not in my voice this time, in theirs. It had taken it, stolen it, bent it. The tone was wrong just slightly, like hearing a recording played back from underwater. But it was their words, their inflection, their little nervous laugh. All of it, turned inside out, and pressed against us. "Let me in," it whispered, borrowing them. "I don't feel right out here." If there was a moment we almost broke, that was it. Hearing your own voice from outside is one thing. Hearing the person you love from outside, while their real body is shaking beside you, that does something to your brain. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw hurt. My partner had tears in their eyes, but they stayed silent. Outside, the thing that wasn't us, tried a few more times. My voice, their voice, little variations. Requests turned to irritation, turned to something flatter and colder. Then, just as quickly as it had arrived, it changed tactics entirely. No more voices, just breathing. At first, it was faint, like someone exhaling slowly. Then, it grew clearer, steady, shallow, right against the tent wall. The kind of sound you make with your ear nearly touching somebody's mouth. It paced slowly around the tent, breathing, smelling, taking its time. I lost track of how long that went on. Minutes, hours. The line between them blurred. Eventually, the breathing moved further away. The footsteps returned in small, gradual crunches. The air got lighter. Dawn came like a curtain lifting. Pale light seeped into the fabric above us. Birdsong returned in tentative notes. We unzipped the tent together, ready to slam it shut if anything moved. Nothing did. The campground looked painfully normal. People yawning, stoking new fires, kids stumbling sleepily toward bathrooms. The host's trailer stood where it had been. His flag flapped in the morning breeze. But there, in the gravel right by our tent door, were 2 sets of prints that didn't belong to us. They were too long, too narrow, no tread patterns like our boots, just faint impressions pressed deep into the dirt, one on either side of the door. As if something had stood there for a very long time, deciding. We went straight to the host. He watched us walk up, took in our faces, and didn't even bother with small talk. "You heard it," he said. We nodded. He sighed, like someone who'd had to give the same bad news too many times. "You didn't open up," he added. "We didn't." "Good," he said. "It hates that." "What is it?" I asked. He shook his head. "Doesn't matter what you call it. It likes places where people sleep and thin walls. It remembers voices. It remembers patterns. And it really, really hates being told no." We packed up as the sun climbed, that normal daylight, making everything feel stupidly harmless. But the rules on that board hit different now. They weren't folklore, they were instructions. So if you ever camp at a place, and the host gives you rules that feel a little too specific, a little too paranoid, don't laugh them off. And if, one night, between 2 and 4, you hear someone you love outside your tent asking to be let in, remember, there's a version of them already inside. That's the only one you're responsible for. If you've never stood in a forest that refuses to grow back, you don't really understand what wrong feels like. Not spooky, not dramatic, just wrong. Like the land itself is holding its breath and waiting for something you can't see. That's what that burn section in Tonto felt like, long before the voices started whispering through our microphones. I wasn't there as a camper, I was there to work. We were shooting a low-budget documentary about wildfire recovery, how forests heal, how ecosystems bounce back. Tonto National Forest has had its share of burns, so it made sense. We had our plan. Old fire scars, new growth, ranger interviews, environmental experts, educational, hopeful, maybe a little heavy at times, but nothing supernatural. The first few locations fit the script perfectly. Blackened trunks with bright green undergrowth, charcoal stumps surrounded by flowers and saplings, nature doing its resilience thing. We filmed slow pans, time lapses, interviews with a Forest Service rep who talked about controlled burns and regrowth rates. Then someone mentioned the old burn that never healed. They said it casually, between takes. You going to cover that 90 seconds fire? The one where nothing ever grew back? We all paused. The Forest Service rep flinched, like they'd stepped on a bruise. There's a reason that section's still closed, he said. It wasn't just a wildfire, it was a containment, and you don't want footage from there in your film. That's all it took to hook us. We asked questions. He dodged them at first, then finally gave us coordinates with this look that said he already regretted it. You go in, he added. You'll see why people stopped pretending it was just another fire. We hiked in late afternoon, hauling cameras, mics, tripods. The deeper we went, the more the forest shifted. Lively bird calls thinned out. The air felt heavier. Sounds didn't carry right. You know that sense of walking towards something before you can see it? Like your body knows there's a border up ahead, that built with every step? Then, without warning, we hit it. One moment, normal Tonto. Dry needles, rocks, green underbrush, living trees. 2 steps later, death. It wasn't gradual. There wasn't a fade from healthy to damaged. It was a line. On one side, life. On the other, 30-year-old charcoal and ash, frozen in place like the fire had gone out yesterday. Every tree beyond that line was black. Not dark brown, not partially burned black. Trunks cracked and split, branches skeletal, bark turned to flaky coal. The ground was a brittle crust of ash and fused soil. No grass, no weeds, no moss. Nothing. Jesus, someone whispered behind me. We stepped over the invisible boundary like we were crossing into another country. The air temperature felt the same, but it was hard to breathe. Not from smoke, there was none, but from this strange tightness in the chest, like the atmosphere was thicker here. Get the wide shot, the director murmured, trying to sound in control. Slow, take it in. We set up. Tripod legs sank slightly into the ashy ground with a soft, unnatural crunch. My boots left faint gray prints behind me, the first disturbance the soil had probably seen in a long time. The camera loved it. Visually, it was incredible, this sea of desolation framed by a still healthy forest wall. The kind of footage that would make people sit up and pay attention. But standing there, those dead trees looming around us, it felt less like we were documenting a disaster and more like we were trespassing on something that wanted to be left alone. The sound guy frowned, adjusting his headphones. Weird noise floor, he muttered. Like a hum. He tapped his mic. You hear that? I took one side of his headphones and listened. At first, it sounded like static, a soft, low hiss underlying the silence. Then, as I focused, I realized it wasn't random. There was a rhythm to it. Not quite voices, not yet, but something that moved in waves. Not cicadas, not wind, not any natural ambiance I recognized. We'll clean it in post, the director said, already moving on. Let's get the drone up, too, overhead of the burn scar. We sent the drone up, Watching the monitor, the scale of the dead zone hit us hard. From above, it was a dark wound carved into the forest, a jagged shape where everything living had stopped at some unseen border and never crossed. No green. Not a single dot. That's not how fire scars work. Seed gets carried in. Life creeps back. It might look thin at first, patchy, but something tries. Here, nothing had. We got our shots and moved deeper. Every footstep kicked up a little puff of gray. My socks, my pants, even the lower part of the tripod started to take on a dull, ghostly film. The further in we went, the more it felt like we were walking across bones. The sound guy kept messing with his gear. "Seriously," he said finally, "there's something in this noise. It's like it wants to be words, and it can't quite get there." The director rolled his eyes. "Maybe it's just your brain trying to make patterns. Keep rolling." We interviewed one of our experts on camera, right there in the dead zone. Ecologist. Very rational, very grounded. She talked about soil sterilization, extreme heat, how some fires burn hot enough to kill everything down several inches. She had real explanations. Science. But when we asked why, after 3 decades, not even a weed had sprouted, she hesitated. "Fire scars don't usually look like this," she admitted. "This is rare." "Rare?" the director asked. "Or unnatural?" She gave him a sharp look. "Everything is natural," she said. "Even the things we don't understand." The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched long between the blackened trunks. The burned wood started to take on these strange, twisted shapes in the fading light: bent arms, reaching fingers, hunched backs. You could ignore it if you kept your eyes on your work. I made the mistake of looking up. There was a point where the wind shifted and moved through all those dead branches at once. You'd think it would sound like dry rattling, like bones knocking together. It didn't. It sounded like a hissed word stretched out over the whole field of trees. Hungry. So quick, so soft, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. We wrapped as fast as we could after that. The director said it was because he wanted to catch golden hour shots back in the living forest, but we all knew. Being in that dead zone as daylight died felt like standing in a locked room while someone else held the key. On the hike back, the mood changed. We joked too loudly. We talked over each other. Nobody mentioned the hum in the headphones, or the way the trees had seemed to lean in. We just wanted distance. The real horror didn't hit until later. Back at the editing suite, we pulled the audio. At first, it was just like the sound guy said, an odd noise floor. Low, constant, almost like a far-off crowd in a large room. You could cut it, dampen it, mask it with music if you wanted. Then we started isolating frequencies. Boost a certain range, and the hum broke into layers. One layer stayed a wash of sound, but underneath it, something started to emerge. Shapes of syllables. Not English, not clearly, but with cadence. Rise and fall. Pause and repeat. Not random. We ran it through a few visualizers, spectrograms, just for curiosity. The patterns weren't like wind. They weren't like insects. They were dense, clustered, intentional. The sound guy slowed it down. That was the first mistake. At half speed, the hum became lower, more like a chant. The rhythm got clearer. There were points where certain sounds hit repeatedly, like a phrase being repeated. He slowed it again. Quarter speed. That's when we heard it in our own language. "It's still hungry," a voice whispered. Not a single voice. Many. Layered. All speaking at once. Slightly out of sync. Some higher, some lower. Male. Female. Indistinct. "It's still hungry. It's still hungry. It's still hungry." The hair on my arms lifted. We rewound. Played it again. Once you heard it, you couldn't unhear it. The phrase was buried in the noise, like something trying very hard to talk through a bad connection. "You recorded this out there?" one of the editors asked. "Pale?" "Raw," the sound guy said. "No filters, just the burn section." We tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone else had been out there, off camera, messing around. Maybe the mic had picked up a radio, or a distant camp, distorted beyond recognition. Maybe our brains were forcing words into random noise. Then, we found it in the drone audio. Different mic, different device, same underlying hum, same phrase, buried in the static at quarter speed. The ecologist we'd interviewed came in a couple days later to review her segment. We showed her some of the footage. Then, because we were idiots, we played her the audio clip. She went quiet halfway through. When it stopped, she didn't say anything for a long time. Say it, the director pushed. You hear it, right? Finally, she nodded. Yeah, I hear it. Could it be some kind of phenomenon? Like sound traveling weird over the terrain? Echoes? Resonance? She looked at us, and for the first time since we'd met her, she looked genuinely uneasy. Do you know the story locals tell about that fire? She asked. We shook our heads. They say, she said slowly, that it wasn't an accident, that people set that fire on purpose, not to clear land, not for logging, to burn something out, something that had rooted itself too deep. That's just folklore, the director said, too fast. Maybe, she said. Except one thing doesn't fit. What? She tapped the muted audio track on the screen. Fire that hot, that thorough, sterilizes the soil. But over time, it cools. Seeds come back. Animals carry life in. Things regrow. That's the pattern. And there? I asked. There, she said. The pattern stopped. It's as if the land itself refuses to accept anything new. Like it's still occupied. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closer. We decided not to use that audio in the final cut. Not because we were afraid of freaking people out, but because there was this quiet, shared sense that broadcasting something that said, "It's still hungry," from a place that already looked like a feeding ground, was a terrible idea. We scrubbed the burn section down to visuals only, no raw ambient sound. Just voiceover and music layered over it. Clean, professional, sanitized. But the files are still archived. On more than one drive. Copied, backed up, sitting there. Sometimes, when the building is empty and late-night silence settles into the editing bays, I swear I can hear that hum through the walls. Not loud, not clear, just the shape of it. It's still hungry. The part that really gets to me, though, isn't the phrase. It's what the ecologist said when we walked her out to the parking lot afterward. She paused by her car, looked back at me, and asked, "You all showered when you got home from that burn, right?" "Yeah," I said. "Why? Did you wash your shoes?" she asked. "No." She nodded like that confirmed something in her head. "Do it," she said. "Soon. Ash is a carrier. You track it places." "Track what?" I asked. She got in, closed the door, and before she drove off, she cracked the window just enough to say one last thing. "Just remember," she said, "fire doesn't only consume, sometimes it cages. And not everything is happy about being kept in one place. So if you ever find yourself near a patch of forest where nothing grows and everything looks like it burned yesterday, don't go in for the perfect shot. Don't take a charred branch as a souvenir. Don't sit on a blackened log and have lunch like it's just scenery. And if, by chance, you record the silence there and later hear something buried in the static whisper about being hungry, delete it. Because whatever that fire pinned down in Tonto, it's had decades to learn how to speak through whatever's left. If you've ever looked at a photo and seen something standing behind you that wasn't there a second ago, then you already understand why I don't trust my own eyes anymore. Tonto National Forest didn't break me with a monster in the trees or something roaring in the night. It did it with footprints. Just footprints. One extra set in the snow that only showed up in the pictures, and the worst part? They stopped following me. They started wading ahead. I hike light and fast. Ultralight pack, streamlined gear, long miles. The Highline Trail had been on my list for a while. Remote, beautiful, challenging enough to feel earned. I picked late winter for it, when there was still snow up high. Not deep drifts. Just that thin, clean layer that makes everything feel sharper, quieter. On the second morning, I decided to do something I thought would be fun. I took a picture of my own footprints. They stretched out behind me in a straight line, stamped into untouched snow. Kind of satisfying, honestly. That, you're the only person out here feeling. I snapped the shot, checked it, looked cool, then kept walking. By that afternoon, it had turned into a little ritual. Every morning, new snow, fresh section of trail, fresh photo of my tracks. It wasn't for social media or anything, just proof that I'd been there, that this adventure was real. The first weird thing that happened was easy to dismiss. On day 3, I stopped for my usual shot. The snow had fallen lightly overnight, just enough to smooth everything out. When I pulled my phone out and snapped the picture, it looked normal, single line of boots behind me. But when I zoomed in on the screen, something felt off. You know when your eyes catch something wrong, but your brain hasn't labeled it yet? It was that. I zoomed further. My footprints were clear, deep, rounded edges. The vague pattern of my boot tread. But alongside them, offset just a little to the left, there were impressions. Not full prints, just hints, slightly shallower, less defined. Like something had stepped where the snow was already disturbed, laying its weight almost perfectly into mine. Almost. That almost is important. The extra marks weren't visible in every step. Just here and there. In some, my boot print was clean. In others, there was the faint suggestion of another shape pressed into the side of it. Longer, narrower. I turned around on the trail, heart thumping. The actual snow behind me showed only one clear set of tracks, mine. I told myself it was compression artifacts, the way the camera processed fine detail on a bright surface. The phone screen, the weird way light hit snow. I turned back, kept hiking, but I started checking every photo twice. By that night, the ritual felt less like a game and more like monitoring. I took my day 3 camp shot tent pitched near a stand of stunted pines, sunset bleeding orange through the branches, and zoomed in on the ground. Same thing, mostly clean. One set of prints leading up to my tent, but far back in the frame, right where the trail curved out of view, there was a patch of disturbed snow that didn't match the pattern of my walk. No clear shape, just churn. Like something had stepped there and settled its weight multiple times. I slept light that night. Not because of sounds there weren't any beyond the usual groans of the forest, but because knowing something might be there, just outside the range of what I could see, did more damage than any roar could have. The second weird thing was harder to explain away. The next morning, I took my photo as usual, a few miles in. I framed my boots at the bottom, the line of tracks stretching away behind. Zoomed in. 2 sets. Not faint, not halfway imagined. 2 distinct sets of footprints. Mine and another. Mine had the rounded, familiar outline of my hiking boots. The second set ran parallel, just a little to the left, at a slight inward angle. The shape was wrong, too long, too narrow at the heel. There wasn't enough detail to make out toes or tread, but the negative space told its own story. Someone had been walking beside me. Except when I spun around on the trail, heart hammering, there was still only one set in the snow. The forest was quiet, just wind. No broken branches, no heavy breaths. Nothing large going through the brush. If anyone had been close to me for long enough to leave that many steps, I'd have heard something, seen something. I looked back down at the phone. 2 sets of tracks, perfectly visible. My stomach turned over. I took another picture, slightly different angle. Now, in that second shot, the extra prints were closer together. As if whoever or whatever was leaving them had shortened their stride, closed distance. My logical brain tried to cope. Maybe it was an old set of tracks from someone days earlier, softened and warped, lined up by coincidence. Maybe I'd stepped on top of them, altering their shape. Maybe the camera was exaggerating contrast. But there's only so much lying you can do to yourself before something breaks. I kept moving, faster now, not running too dangerous in that terrain, but with a focus that turned the world into narrow slices of trail and breath and heartbeat. My ritual changed. I stopped taking photos for fun, started doing it like checks, diagnostics. Snapshot. Zoom. Inspect. At first, the extra footprints stayed alongside mine, sometimes faint, sometimes clearer, always in the photographs alone, never in the actual snow when I turned around. Then, on a stretch of exposed ridge, everything changed. I took a picture without really thinking about it. Boots on the rock-hard crust, valley dropping away on one side, distant peaks under a cold sky. I lifted the phone to glance at the preview, only half looking, ready to stuff it back in my pocket. And froze. There were my boots at the bottom of the frame. Then my footprints behind me, clear as ever. But the second set, the ones that had been shadowing me from the side, weren't there. They were in front of me. A line of those too long, too narrow impressions stretched ahead, leading around a bend I hadn't reached yet. Each print was perfectly placed where my boot would naturally land next, if I kept walking at the same pace. The thing wasn't following anymore. It was walking ahead, matching my path before I took it. That cold, hollow feeling in my chest spread into my fingers. For a second, I genuinely considered turning around and retracing my steps all the way back to the trailhead. Pride, distance, schedule, none of it mattered as much as not walking into whatever had started planning my route. But the snow behind me, when I glanced back, was still just one set deep, mine. And in a twisted way, that made going back feel worse. Like stepping into the same loop, trapped between my own impressions and someone else's predictions. I did something stupid and halfway superstitious instead. I stepped off the trail, just a little, enough that the next few prints I left were at an angle, cutting across the established line. Breaking it. The snow off to the side was deeper. My boots sank, crunching through crust to softer layers. I took 6, 7 steps. Heart clenched. Then stopped and snapped another picture. My prints, fresh, jagged, and beside them, nothing. No second set, no ghost of another path, just mine. For the first time in hours, I exhaled fully. Maybe it had been some kind of glitch after all, tied to the way the main trail had compacted snow. Maybe stepping off had broken whatever pattern my brain was stuck in. I checked the image again. My shoulders loosened a little. Then, like an idiot, I zoomed out. The wider frame pulled more of the landscape into view. My off-trail steps, the undisturbed snow around them, the curve of the trail now a few yards away. And there, faint but undeniable, at the point where my improvised route would rejoin the main path, were the other footprints. Waiting, just a few of them, 4, 5, positioned exactly where my line would intersect the trail again, as if whatever owned them had skipped ahead to the place it knew I'd come crawling back to. I didn't swear out loud. It felt like the sort of moment you whisper through, like any loud noise might draw attention from something that didn't need help finding me. The forest felt wrong in a new way now. Before, it had just been empty, watching. Now it felt collaborative, as if the space between trees, the dips in the land, the twists in the trail, were part of some long equation that ended with my name. I stayed off trail for the next half mile. Stupid, tiring, dangerous, if I twisted an ankle or hit a hidden hole. But the ground didn't care about my knees. That extra line of prints didn't appear beside mine in any of the photos I took off route. The fun didn't stop though, it just changed again. By late afternoon, clouds had moved in, flattening the light. The world turned into a muted painting, white, gray, dark green. I checked my map, saw a small shelter icon ahead, one of those 3-sided structures the Forest Service puts up in rough spots. Wind was picking up. It made sense to reach that for the night. When I got close enough to see it through the trees, low roof, open front, snow piled against the back, I felt a weird mix of relief and dread. Shelter meant a break from the wind. Shelter also meant only one way in or out. I stopped a few yards away, took a photo, because of course I did. The image showed the shelter's dark interior, the front lip of the platform, the snow-streaked roof, my boots at the bottom, my footprints leading toward it. And on the platform, just inside the shadow line where the open front gave way to darkness, were prints. Not boot prints, not paws. Bare feet. The shape was unmistakable. Toes, arch, heel, long, narrow. No socks, no tread. Just deep impressions in a thin layer of wind-blown snow dusting the boards, as if someone had stood there recently, facing me. My eyes jumped from the screen to the shelter and back. The platform was empty. No marks, the snow on it lay smooth, untouched. In the photo, those bare feet dug in like something had planted itself there and waited. I didn't go in. I half-jogged past that shelter, feeling the invisible doorway of it at my side, like a mouth I was refusing to walk into. The trail curved away. Trees closed in again. The sky darkened further. By the time I made camp hastily, too close to a stand of trees, not my best work, I had stopped taking pictures. I didn't want to know what was standing in the frame anymore. Ignorance suddenly felt safer. Night in the forest without photos is different after that kind of day. You feel your surroundings instead of recording them. Every branch sway, every subtle shift becomes a question. Is that wind Or is that the sound of something deciding where to put its feet? I lasted until around midnight before breaking my own rule. The tent was cold. My mind wouldn't stop replaying images, double tracks, prints ahead, bare feet on an empty platform. I needed proof. One last test. Something to either confirm I'd lost it or give me something solid to face. I took out my phone, turned the brightness way down, flipped the camera to front-facing, not because I wanted a selfie, but because pointing the screen toward me felt less like luring something in than pointing the lens out would. The image showed my face lit faintly, the dark curve of the tent behind. No snow, no trail, just me. Tired eyes, pale skin, in the glow. I watched for a minute. Nothing changed. Then, for reasons I still can't explain, I tilted the phone down enough that the bottom of the frame caught the tent floor and the edge of the door zipper. The picture adjusted to the new light. Grainy, dark. A faint line appeared where the zipper hem cast a shadow. And just beyond that, where the snow outside would be packed from walking. Faintly, barely, their gray shapes started to register. My breath caught. I didn't blink. The camera, desperate for something to grab onto in the low light, exaggerated contrast. The shapes became a little clearer. Two impressions, elongated, side by side, or rather one slightly ahead of the other, angled toward the tent. Not prints in deep snow, just the suggestion of them, but enough to know that whatever had been following beside me, then walking ahead of me, had finally settled on a new position, right outside, facing in. I locked the phone, didn't save the image. I couldn't stand the idea of that file existing anywhere. I lay there, listening, feeling the weight of presence pressed against the outer wall of my little fabric bubble. It never scratched, never spoke, never circled. It didn't need to. It had my route, my habits, my pace. It knew exactly where I was, exactly when I'd be there. It had been practicing for days. You ever realize you're not lost in the wilderness, you're right where something wanted you? That's the feeling that held me frozen until the first gray hint of dawn seeped through the tent. When I stepped out in the morning, the snow around my camp was smooth, wind-polished. Any prints that might have been there were gone. I didn't take any more pictures on that trail. I got out, didn't go back. Here's the part that still curls my stomach though, late at night, when I'm scrolling through my phone. Sometimes, very rarely, I'll be flipping through old photos from that trip, from others, and I'll hit one I don't remember taking. A shot of a path, of a doorway, of my own hallway at home. And somewhere in the grain, in the darker pixels at the edge of the frame, will be the faintest suggestion of something long and narrow, parallel to where my footsteps would naturally fall. Not behind me, not even beside me, just ahead, standing exactly where I'm about to walk next. So if you ever start a cute little habit of photographing your trail as you go, do yourself a favor. If you see even the hint of something walking with you in those shots, stop, delete them. Because once it knows your route well enough to be waiting in the next frame, you're not documenting your hike anymore. You're documenting how close it's gotten.